Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt, Nick, Rainier, and Devin. In this week's episode, we're going to go over a list sent in to us by Corbin Morissette, and then we're going to move on to the top 5 underused models, whether that be heroes or warriors. And then we're going to move into the duel, where Matt will be going up against Devin. So we're going to start off with a list, so I'll move it over to you, Mick. Mick, what's this week's list?
Right, so this week we've got an unusual list. It's a Hobbit one, based on the Battle of Dale that occurred during the War of the Ring, between Dale and a ton of Easterlings, as Corbin says. The men, with the help of the dwarves, were eventually able to drive off the Easterlings by the cost of dying Ironfoot and Brand Bar's descendants, who both died retreating the people of Dale into Erebor. So the list we have is Brand, who I believe here is being used as a profile of Girion with the Great Bow. Then we've got Radagast the Brown with Slay and Sebastian. Then we've got 2 Captains of Dale with no extra equipment, 12 Warriors of Dale with spears and shields, one of them carrying a war horn, and all of these guys are under Brand's Warband. Then 12 Warriors of Dale with shields, one of them carrying a banner, all under the first Captain's Warband. And 12 Warriors of Dale with Erzgard bows, all under the second Captain's Warband. So that's 747 points for a 750-point list. 10 might, 40 models, and 13 of them have bows. And Corbin just made a note here that he threw in Radagast into the list because he thinks that the list could use a wizard, and Gandalf at this time was busy fighting in Gondor. So what do you guys think about this list?
Well, he's automatically... What we do need to acknowledge here is he's restricted himself to theme. So he acknowledged that, like, Gandalf, for instance, was in Gondor. So if I told him to switch Radagast for, let's say, Saruman, that probably would be a no-go. And not to say I would, but I think he still wouldn't do it because he's trying to stay thematic. The problem with analyzing a thematic list is a lot of advice might be unthematic. And that would be my fear here. I mean, is anyone else kind of getting that feeling?
Yeah, I get that same feeling. I think still there are a few things that he could change. One off the bat is, I think everyone's going to agree, give both of the captains a bow. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Now,
So,
would you guys switch out a wizard for anyone? Would you, if I know that we said he's trying to stick to theme, but if you were to switch, would you switch him out for a different wizard?
Well, if anything, instead of switching a wizard into a different one, I might potentially switch the wizard into flying on an eagle, rather than being on a sleigh.
Yeah.
Because the eagle has a lot of fighting potential. Especially since you can also be dismounted, so you actually have 2 figures that you can be putting into different places. You'd be losing the staff, but these days, with Nature's Wrath not being as powerful a spell as before, having the staff doesn't give Radagast as much of a benefit as potentially an eagle could give him, especially since the sleigh just has such an enormous base. It's very difficult to actually place it somewhere useful. Whilst with an eagle, you actually have a threat that's really good in a lot of situations.
Yeah, it kind of fits theme too, because if you see the behind the scenes for the Hobbit movies, Radagast gives Gandalf his staff. So if you want to go pure theme, like it also makes sense to have Radagast with no staff. But what were you saying, Matt?
Well, I mean, I was just going to say what this list kind of really lacks from a competitive standpoint is a hitter. The only one who can strike in this list is Girion. Radagast can't strike. So if you put him on the eagle and get him up to fight 7, that need for a hitter kind of goes away, because Radagast can transfix somebody, charge in with the great eagle, and nobody's going to outfight him. And he can also go in with just fight 7, and somebody calls a heroic strike, Radagast can call a heroic defense if he wants, and still fight that way. But the eagle gives this list some punch that it doesn't already have. The other thing I'd say about this list is the way the warbands are arranged. So this puts guys with one type of weapon in warbands, basically in their own warbands. And I think the way I think you want to do this is you want to make sure that each warband, if it had to, could fight on its own, because depending on the scenario and deployment, it may have to. So what you can do is you can divvy these up so that each warband has some guys with just shields, some guys with spears and shield, and some guys with bows. I would also suggest taking some points and giving the guys with bows spears, and that way you can actually take some of the spears from spear shield guys, give them to the bows, and the bows become the second rank, and then you basically can get a longer battle line that way with a better defense value.
I actually 100% agree with Matt there. Actually, I was going to mention that is the fact that the warbands, for some reason, he has all the spears like in one warband. So that is not typical. You wouldn't really do that. I mean, while you could have all the bows in one warband, I mean, even there, I still say you can divide up the threats and have it where even if you did deploy together, having your bows in different spots is actually advantageous to you. So I think having that a little bit more varied across the warbands is great. I agree with the Eagle. I actually agree that the Sleigh is no longer as useful as it once was, mostly because of Nature's Wrath going away. So, I mean, other than that, I mean, now that they've taken kind of all the best advice out of the picture, I mean, that's realistically how I'd agree to change it. I mean, because I wouldn't say you should remove Dale and start allying, because clearly you want to play Dale with just one thing thrown in. That's kind of your goal here. So, yeah, I mean, Radagast on an Eagle, and then keep the rest of the list the way it is, with it, of course, mixed up a little bit more.
Yeah, there was another thing Corbin was asking in terms of tweaks. I think allying them with dwarves would be very themey and potentially competitive. And he also thought about putting Windlands, but without Black Arrow, it's significantly underwhelming compared to Bard's Windlands.
Which is underwhelming.
It's just underwhelming.
Which is underwhelming anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't play a Windlance. I mean, you already have the range to bring yourself to your opponent. If your opponent has a siege weapon that outranges you anyway, you're not going to outfight it with a Windlance. And so a Windlance just simply is not very powerful. And it's not going to be enough for your opponent to come to you unless they have, like, nothing. In which case they were coming to you anyway.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I also thought of the idea of allying in with dwarves. If you look at the allies list, you can't actually ally in Iron Hills because it's a red alliance. Well, I mean, you could, but it would turn this into a red alliance because they're clearly not contemplating this particular variation of Dale in the army lists. One thing you could do if you wanted to ally in dwarves is you are green with Army of Thror, and you could just basically take. I mean, I actually came up with a list thinking this through that had Thrain as the leader of Army of Thor, and then you just relabel him as Dane. So he's the older, he would be the older Dane. So he's too old to ride around on a war pig anymore, but he's still got the hammer, and you could use him kind of as old Dane with a combination of kind of grim hammers, because maybe that's how the Iron Hills fought at that time, and use the Grim Hammers as the front rank with the Warriors of Dales with Spear as the second rank.
Now, do you guys think that Dale in general is competitive? Like, do you look? I know it depends on the scenarios you get, the opponent you get, and how good the player. Do you think this could do well at a tournament?
I think it'll get torn apart a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a strength 3, defense 5 at best army, with only one hero with any type of heroic strike potential. I mean, I don't think they're terrible, but I
think they're pretty competitive. I think they can run similar to a Rangers of Ithilien list. I know there's a guy from our group named Marcus. You've played against Marcus, Devin, so he's a pretty good player. He plays a pure Dale force with Gurion and just captains with bows. And at 800 points, you can get around 20-ish elven bows, basically, with captains fully loaded and Gurion just shooting the crap out of stuff. So I think it's pretty competitive. And when battle lines hit, if you play it right, the warriors or the captains of Dale, I believe, are fight 5. Am I correct on that?
They are 5/5, yeah.
Fight 5.
Yeah. So you have fight 5, and everyone else is fight 4. So you have, like I said, a semi-massive shooting Corsair type army that's out there. So I think they're actually pretty competitive. People just don't play them.
So
Yeah.
you would take Radagast out, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
I would
Probably,
take-
yeah.
yeah. You need to take Radagast out because the army bonus here of having all your shooters go to shoot 3 is well worth not putting a yellow ally in. You get a lot out of that army bonus, which may be a reason to go with the Army of Thor allies and just call them Iron Hills. And I mean, especially if you put like Grimhammers in front of a whole bunch of Warriors of Dale with spear and bow, that's a lot of firepower that goes out because you have the throwing weapons in the front, and then you have the spears and then you have the spears and bows behind, and you can really drag people towards you. And then they gotta go through that last 6 inches of kill zone, where they're, taking both throwing weapons from the Grimhammers and arrows.
Then I guess for me, I haven't seen this list too often, as Rainier mentioned. A lot of people don't play them. I've only seen this list played by Tim Hickson, who's a California player, kind of a legend in the community. But I mean, every time I've seen him play it, it never appeared to me as a threatening list. Of course, the bows are certainly a different story. But yeah, I guess then if you actually get it with an 800-point list or 750-point list with 20 bow shots, and they all happen to be fight 4, I suppose you could make it competitive. But yeah, then I guess I'll defer to Rainier and Matt's advice on that.
And then each captain has a bow with 2 might, and then Gurion has his bow with all his might. So it's just pretty scary.
One other tweak that's worth mentioning here is if you're gonna have a banner, make sure you give him a spear. The banner should be on one of the guys with spear and shield rather than just shield, because you're always going to want him in the second rank anyway. And if he's got a spear, he can always support something.
Yeah. All right. So ultimately, would you guys say that we should just take Radagast out the list entirely to make it competitive, or is it like Radagast is actually helping? Because it sounds like, from those of you who have seen Dale a lot more, that you would just take Radagast out, and that's actually how you would improve the list.
I mean, I don't see a problem with keeping him in. I just think you have to put him on an eagle if you want to make it competitive, because even the idea of popping him off, or like the eagle's wounded and Radagast can heal the eagle, like it's just a mega eagle swirling around killing stuff. But I wouldn't say it's necessary to make him competitive, but for sure put him on an eagle, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Radagast does give you is he does give you that panic steed as a way to kind of check the opposing mounted heroes running roughshod over your all your leaders on foot, because he can be, basically hitting them with panic steed each turn. And I think that, in the combination of the eagle, six casts of panic steed with maybe a transfix thrown in there on the eagle is probably enough for this. And then you have an eagle that really can kind of hang back and stand behind the lines and really make somebody think hard about how he's going to charge your line that's shooting him up.
And Corbin, actually, if you're hearing this about his spells, I agree with Matt here that you should probably not even bother with Hour of Dismay. Without the staff, Hour of Dismay is probably something you'd have to throw too much will into, even if it was just 2. And it's too risky to even try to cast with the amount of will that you have, and no staff. So that's one thing that I know a lot of Radagast players will cast it, trying to get Hour of Dismay off. I think you don't need terror, and you have better spells to cast on only 6 will.
All right. Thank you for your list, Corbin. If you have any other lists, please leave them in the comment section below. We're going to move on to the main topic of today, which is the top 5 underused models, whether they be heroes or warriors. I'm going to start off with Devin this week. Devin, what was your first model that we feel is underused?
All right. So I wanted to make an homage to an earlier episode that we had where Mick offended the entire podcast and said that Isildur is terrible. I'm like, ooh.
Yes, yes.
I think that Isildur is actually really good. And you don't see him because his father is really, really
So
good.
much better.
But I mean, honestly, if you are trying to save the points, and I think there's like almost a 65-point difference between a fully loaded Isildur and a Elendil. Isildur, I mean, the fact that you have a ring that in your natural fight 6 means that you outfight everything in the game, including Balrogs. Doesn't matter. Anything can't heroic strike against you. He has a courage value where you can take on and off this ring at will, and you never have to worry about it. So, I mean, theoretically, as long as you don't roll that 1 or 2 and your opponent now controls it and walks him off and then takes the ring off. But even if that happens, he's got a healthy defense, actually, 7, I want to say, 7 before.
8 with shield.
Yeah,
7
8 with his shield. So he's 8 with his shield. I mean, when you're talking about the fact that this guy is strength 5, I mean, most things in the game with a high defense, if it's a high defense, even a hero, it's considered 7 defense. He wounds that on 5s and doesn't even need +1 to wound to do it. So, I mean, this guy is just amazing for 135 points. I really don't know. The only reason, actually, I wouldn't pick him is just if I have too many points and I need to pick Elendil, just because it just makes more sense economically. But honestly, if I'm just allying in, I would pick this guy all the time. Plus natural resistance to magic. I mean, if you had put him in any other list where Elendil didn't exist, you would be thinking this is a god amongst men. I think that this is an obvious, solid choice. So that's my number 1 underrated model, and I disagree with Mick.
Well, one thing in defense of my previous statement is that if you do take Elendil, then you can't have the ring on Isildur, and that's my only real problem with him. But other than that, if you're not taking Elendil, yeah, by all means take him.
I actually had Isildur also picked as my number 1 underrated model as well for all those. I mean, Isildur is if you put him on a horse and give him a shield, is a figure that can kill any other figure in the game. He can kill quite easily another figure that costs 100 points more than him, if you get him into the right position with the ring. And I don't think that or even if you don't, as long as he's got the ring, even if somebody just charges in, because he's always going to win, he's always going to have the higher fight value, and he's got the strength 5.
As a quick note, and I do have to make a quick note, I'm sorry, because I know the audience is probably screaming here. You mentioned charging in with a horse and then putting on the ring.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I meant if somebody charges him, you put him on the horse to start out, get him in the right place, or run over enemy warriors. And then when it's time for him to go head to head with the other guy's main hero, then obviously he gets off of his horse and puts on the ring, because he can't wear the ring on the horse. But he's still a figure that can kill any other figure in the game, regardless of points level. And with possible exception being like the Balrog or Sauron. For 135 points, he's easily the best buy in the game. And by the way, I also think he's worth 135 points even without the ring on the horse. And so, I mean, I'll take him even if I'm taking his dad with him too, because he's with a fight 6, strength 5 mounted hero, defense 8 mounted hero with 3 might and resistance to magic is well worth 135 points.
I just want just add one quick thing. About like 12 or 14 years ago, we all had arguments of, yes, you can put the ring on a horse and the model disappears. And a lot of people played it that way. But luckily that's not the case anymore.
All right, Rainier, what was your model?
Okay, so for this model, I'm going to kind of give a nod to my Scottish heritage. I'm going with the Klansman of Lamadin. I think he's underused and I think underappreciated. For 8 points, you can get a Fight 4 model that's also Courage 5, which is really big with these Walls of Terror. So a Fight 4 Courage 5 model that has the ability to get a free two-handed strike when you roll a natural 6, which if you're playing fiefdoms with Prince Imrahil's banner, you're going to be rolling a lot of reroll dices, banner reroll dices. Couple that with you can throw them in the front line with a pike block. You're getting 3 dice, so even if you roll 5 or so with him, like maybe a pike will roll a 6. So I think they're, I don't know. I don't see them often, and I think they could be used a lot more in Fiefdom and Gondor lists because you can take these elite. When someone thinks of a Fiefdom list, they think of an elite force. But if you take a whole buttload of Clansmen of Lamadin, you can spam it out. You can get around 50 models in a Fiefdom army. So yeah, that's why I chose the Clansmen of Lamadin. That and they're just cool, and I want to see them played more often.
I just got one quick question for you. Now, is the fact that they always have to go two-hand, is that not kind of a downside to them?
I would originally say yes, because I know on one of my other list of underused models would be a two-handed model, but I wouldn't say it's too much of a problem. I played a lot of Klansmen at last Articon's doubles, and I brought it as like a cool theme, like, oh, we're gonna go have fun. I'm gonna play with a new friend, and just play. But it actually doesn't. It's not that hard. You'd be shocked at how much sixes you roll with the banner effect, and even that. Say if you don't get the two-handed hit, it's an 8-point model that dies. Like I know some armies that's a lot, but if you have a lot of them, it's not much. You can put them, like I said, put them in a pipe flock or flank them out in the Courage 5-2 makes a huge difference going against Terror. But it doesn't, on paper it looks bad, but no, I wasn't really affected by it when I played them.
All right. Mick, what was one of your models?
So that's another one from one of the previous episodes. Mouth of Sauron is one of my favorite underused models. People tend to go a lot with ring wraiths or the likes of Shagrat and all the other heroes in Mordor, but in fact, Mouth of Sauron, things that really are good for him are that first of all he's a hero of valor, so he gets to bring more models. But he's also fight 5, 2 attacks plus an armored horse, so 3 attacks on charge. And he's got 3 quite useful spells and Heroic March, which will very often come in handy. And all that is under 100 points. So he's just one of those models where at smaller points levels, at fight 5 and 3 attacks on charge, he will be just as good as any other cavalry heroes at killing standard warriors. And if needed, he has a Transfix, he has an Instill Fear. So he's able to actually manage by himself quite well. And then at higher points, it's just nice to have another Hero of Valor, another March, and just like another decent fighter.
Yeah, he's kind of another model that it's due to the options around him that he gets overshadowed. But
That's
really,
right.
like if you had put him in any other list, I mean, I'm trying to really do the math here, but I think almost even without, with the armored horse, he becomes 85 points. So I guess
That's right, yeah.
So he definitely needs his spells in order to justify his cost. But I mean, yeah, he's. I actually think he's very good, and I guess if you didn't have the ring raise, then he would pretty much be one of your few options to actually ally in.
I think
that's the thing. Yeah, with a Hero of Valor situation, you're then able to ally him into a Moria list, like we did with I think Richard's list 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it too at a small points list, like the Mouth of Sauron. I would even take him over a ring wraith. Like he's just
yeah.
Thing you get,
yeah, like the 500-600 point kind of thing. Which is ironic because he led the Black Gate, which is like the largest legion of Mordor ever was.
All right, Devin, what was your second model?
I guess we're skipping Matt because he had the same first model as me, I suppose. Yeah. So sorry, Matt, for stealing thunder there. But so my second model, actually, I'll go ahead and stay within Mordor. And by the way, this is not in any particular order, everyone. The Undying. So ironic that I'm saying this guy because he was actually probably the most powerful model in the game, not just one edition ago. But I still think he's actually pretty good. If you point up the Witch King to his stat line of 18 will and 2 might, they are exactly the same cost, which means that he is getting his ability to use fate as, will as fate for free. And so put him up on a Fell Beast. I have had some games. In fact, I even went to the Warhammer World GT where my Witch King, I had 2 points of fate on him and he died. Like I rolled 2 1s and that was it. That was the end of it. It was literally a dwarf warrior that killed me. And so I actually do still think there's a place for the Undying. I feel like he's overshadowed because now the Witch King with the crown, statistically, math-wise, is a better caster. Just hands down with the crown, you just can't beat him. And so, I get that. But if you do not have, or you do not want to sink like 200 points into something, I think I would always kind of put him on the Fell Beast, but I think even off the Fell Beast, he's a pretty reliable character. And as soon as you pick him as your general, most of the time your opponent has given up on trying to kill your general. So he's an automatic, like, you're not giving up those points. Like, they don't even try most of the time. And with Legolas not being as around as often, before he was around all the time because Fell Beasts were guaranteed to be in every list. But now you don't see Legolas, so therefore, and you don't see Floyd because Balin is required and it's a very specific type of list. So therefore, the things that shut him down are no longer around anymore. So it's kind of funny that we don't see him anymore, but I do think it's just because, not that the Witch King is better, but the Witch King has a little bit more all-around use. But what do you guys think about that?
Well, I want to ask. Now, I know you mentioned you'd always put him on a Fell Beast, but him on horse, just sitting back, being your general, casting spells, is that I always tend to use him on horse because I use him as that general. He can take 15 guys. He's your general, cast spells, hard to kill. Like you said, you give up on the general points. And then you can just kind of use more points towards warriors or better heroes. So what do you think of him on horse?
I actually don't mind him on a horse. The reason I take him on Fell Beast is a couple different purposes. If I don't already have another Fell Beast in the list, I like taking him as a Fell Beast because it creates a panic amongst my opponent. So automatically, just by having him behind the ranks on a Fell Beast means my opponent has to think differently, has to move differently. Also, I can exploit mistakes a lot easier if he's on a Fell Beast. It also gives the Undying a more overall general purpose. So he is strictly a caster while he's on course. That he can't do anything else, and so that's all his job is. But on Fell Beast, now suddenly he becomes a combat unit. And obviously he can't take out heroes. Well, he potentially could, but even if you transfix a hero, they'll be probably matching his fight, if not beating it still. So, and then you have to worry about the next turn if he loses the combat. So, also he gets the hurl potential and such. So, that's why I put him on a Fell Beast. Would I put him on a horse? Yeah, absolutely. I think, even as a caster, he still is someone who will wear out the opponent's will. He can easily, if you have the Undying and the opponent has an LSR, there is no way they're taking a bombardment of spells over the course of the game. I just prefer to make sure my Undying has multiple purposes, but that's why I do it.
So there's also an argument to make for not making your general the Undying. First of all, because of Contest of Champions, and you may want somebody else who's a harder hitter to be your leader. But there's a lot of scenarios now that the match play guide has come out, where you get points for protecting somebody and having one of your heroes, not your leader, not die. Like, for example, Fog of War. And there's a couple other scenarios like that.
Assassination,
and the Undying is kind of the classic guy to make you have to kill this guy in order to get points. And then you can just put him on a horse, put him behind the lines. He's your support caster, and he's a guy that's going to be very, very hard to run down and kill. And I think there's a there's a good role for the Undying as that guy in your list.
All right, I'm going to move over to Matt. Matt, what was your second model?
Okay, so my second model is also a callback to a previous episode, also a ring wraith, and that's Camille the Easterling, who's, I think, somebody we don't see as much as we really should, because I think he is the guy after the Witch King, arguably, who's your killer ring wraith, the guy you definitely want to put on a fell beast, and the guy you definitely want to send in to kill stuff. And there's two reasons for that. The first is I guess there's two reasons within the same special rule, and that's his Essence Leech special rule. So he can spend a point of will to up his fight value by 1, which is very useful if you're going against 5/5 heroes and you're trying to kill them, 5/5 captains. If you're going against elves, you don't have to worry about going in and tying. And you don't have to spend that precious point of might on a strike in order to kill, a couple of Rivendell Knights or something like that. And the other thing is the fact that he gets a point of will back for every wound that he causes. So you can reliably keep sending him in against 2 warriors, go in, cast a spell as you go in, maybe a transfix on a hero somewhere else, go in, fight 2 warriors, kill them both, and you've ended up with a net loss of 0 will. Because you spent 1 on the spell, you spent 1 for fighting, but you got 2 back for killing the warriors. So he is a wraith that you can just send in to kill stuff, and just repeatedly do it throughout the game. He will hang on for a long time. He basically fills the role that the Knight of Umbar used to fill, as somebody who could reliably go in and just kill stuff. And I think that's his role now, and I think he's great for that.
Would you ever put him on fell beast or always keep him on a horse?
No, you always put him on a fell beast. You never put him on a horse. He's somebody that you always want on a fell beast to go in and get that 3, or basically get that extra strength and that knockdown, even against cavalry or hurl. You always want him on the fell beast.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd agree with you, Matt. Like,
Yeah, same.
Camul is what makes the Easterling, outside of Amber, what makes the Easterling list at all competitive. And I think he's so competitive that I would actually even take him in Mordor lists for the exact same reasons you said. Like, he just fulfills the Knight of Umbar's rule in the old edition. He just kills stuff.
And by the way, I think pairing him with the Undying in a Mordor list is a good way to go. You put Camul on a fell beast, you put the Undying on a horse, and the Undying is your caster, and Camul is your killer.
Yeah.
All right, Rainier, what was your second model?
All right, so I'm going to give a nod off to the old edition. This model kind of got nerfed in the new era, but I'm going to go to Haradrim Taskmaster. I'm choosing him because he's quite cheap. He doesn't do what he used to do, but he still gives free heroic moves, marches, and shoots on a 4+ to people in his same list, so Haradrim warriors. But I think the one main thing that he can do to Haradrim army that people want to do is spam the force out. So most taskmasters can only lead six models. He can lead 12. And I think that's a huge thing if you're going to take a spam Harad list at like a higher level point, and you figure with or without, when you start thinking, oh, should I bring a captain? Should I bring a king? The taskmaster gives you the ability to just bring a small 50-point model and give him 12 more, or 6 more bows to your list. So yeah, that's why I chose the taskmaster. I also think he balances out a Haradrim list, because a Haradrim list hits really hard in the early game, but they can't really take it that well in the mid to late game. And with his ability to give free might, free heroic marches, free heroic moves towards the late game, I think that's a big bonus for a Haradrim force.
Just making sure I understood a comment you said. You said that most taskmasters lead 6. The Orc taskmaster also leads 12. Is there one that you were referring to?
Maybe I'm thinking about Shaman. So
okay.
Doopsie. No, But even the ability that he can lead 12, like that's a really good deal, I think, for his point cost.
I have to say, I run Harad a lot, and I do always include a Taskmaster because it's not that it's a huge issue for Harad, but they only have they have 2 now with Raza having 3 might. So all their heroes only have 2 might or below besides Raza and Suladan. So that ability to get the extra might for heroic moves as well as that chance to keep marching, I mean, that's a huge thing when, you're probably only going to have 3 or 4 heroes for Harad, so you probably have 8 or 9 might, and that's not to say 8 or 9 might isn't bad, but anytime you have the ability to just keep your might, that's always such a great thing. So I do like the Taskmaster a lot.
I say the Taskmaster is probably being overshadowed by a lot of times trying to bring all these big heroes into the game, but one thing that's interesting about the Taskmaster is Suladan already has Heroic March. So if you do not bring another captain, then the risk of bringing a Taskmaster is if you don't roll the 4 up, you lose March. That's it. You get 1 March, and that's all you have. But if you have Suladan already in your list, which if you're playing Harad, then why do you not have Suladan in your list? Then, Suladan has March already. So that helps. Now you can, as an alternative, use Suladan. So I think that's another great pitch for him. So.
All right.
There's actually another thing I was going to add in that he loses a might point compared to a Heralding Chieftain. Other than that, he's pretty much the same. But it sort of depends on how your list is going to play. Because if you are planning on using at least 2, but ideally 3 or more marches or moves throughout the game, then the Taskmaster will, on average, pay himself back for that 1 extra might point. But if you're not planning on doing it, then Heralding Chieftain's definite extra might points might potentially be better. So let's say very high points like 700, 800 or 1,000 points, you're definitely going to be using more marches and heroic moves. So you should definitely have 1. But at something like 400, 500 points, you might not even be calling a single march all game. So at that point, you might as well have a chieftain to have a definite extra might point over the Taskmaster.
All right. Mick, what was your second model?
I was going to go with the theme of ring raids because we've already had a couple of them. My second model was the evil version of Lobelia Sackville Baggins on steroids, as in the Tainted. That's purely because his special rule, the Miasmatic Presence, is effectively the same thing as Lobelia's, but it's only sort of one-sided in that if your opponent breaks, you can turn it on, but if you break, you don't have to turn it on. So there is a potential sort of like a game-winning situation where if you've broken your opponent first, you can basically turn off their standfasts and have warriors just run away randomly. However, I think the main reason why he's being underplayed is because, again, it's like with those with things like Mouth of Sauron or other ring raids. There's just so many other choices that people tend to go for, like Gulavar, Barrow White, Shades, virtually everything else in an Agmar list, for example, is in some way more appealing. But the special rule which the Tainted has is potentially game breaking if used correctly, and doesn't really have any major downsides if it's not used.
Yeah, I think the Tainted is actually one of those ones where, for those who don't know, Kylie actually won Articon. Actually, I believe the Masters or Articon itself with the Tainted in her list. Actually, it was the Masters, and I mean that's a model that I think if the Witch King simply didn't exist, once again, like the Undying, probably the Tainted would be the main choice all the time with the army. So, and even in Mordor, actually, I think he's fantastic. So.
I think another benefit
I would use him in Mordor a lot, yeah.
I think another benefit of the Tainted, I think especially in like an Angmar list, is that you never really see him. So people don't have experience going up against him. So you kind of have to figure, you know what his rule is, but you don't really know how that plays out, because more than likely, if you've played him, you haven't played him more than a couple times. And more than likely, for most people, they've never played him, so they don't really know how he works. So then they have to look him up, and then you always have that kind of like, okay, well, how is this going to turn out kind of situation. So I think Tainted is that benefit where, because he's not used very often, nobody really knows what to do.
Well, there's this additional thing where people very often tend to put their heroes in the back ranks to protect them from bow fire or from whatever else, or just protect them from like being compelled out. And the Tainted can just stop heroic moves as well. So you can find yourself in a situation where, let's say, your opponent is trying to get to an objective, but then you have a Tainted someone nearby. Then if they want to call a heroic move, the warriors are not going to be able to actually jump onto the objective because they're not affected by those heroic moves. So in a way, he can secure your priority without having to spend might on heroics.
All right. Devin, what was your third model?
All right. So a third model, I wanted to poke at Rainier this time. And it's funny because me and him have this back and forth about Corsair Reavers. He hates them.
Worth it, guys. Not worth it. Well, worth it, probably. I just don't like them.
He doesn't like them, and it's funny because I actually really like them. And then you know what? Who knows? Maybe they're not worth it. But with the recent FAQ, and I'm just turning the page of these guys, but with the recent FAQ, I mean, if you look at this is a 9-point model, so it's 1 point more than a hunter work, all right? And we pay for these stats. It's Fight 4. Now I get why he doesn't like it. It's Strength 3, Defense 3. Now the Strength 3 hardly matters, and we'll get into that. But the Defense 3. Rainier's experience in them is that they just fall apart pretty fast. I've played lists with like 20 of these guys, and I've personally liked it. But if you back these guys up with a spear, they have 2 attacks and courage 4, which often, because you're in the Corsair Legion or this army, you're going to put a Black Numenorian with a horn, so it'll be courage 5 anyway. But the fact that they get +1 to wound and fearless if they fail their test, which they can choose to do now even within range of a bosun. But before you had to do this silly trick where you had to move the bosun out of range and then move him back in range if you wanted to control him. Now they can just stay within range. And I get also the weakness is, okay, if the bosuns die, which personally I wouldn't play if you're going to play a lot of them, if you're going to spam them out, then I would play 2 bosuns minimum. Just to make sure like these things don't go out of control. But basically, I mean, a fearless +1 to wound model with Fight 4 and 2 attacks is pretty devastating, in my opinion, especially with backed up the spear and a banner, which bosuns are banners to them. So, I mean, it fills that up. Now, obviously, once you play 2 bosuns, the natural weakness is now you have 2 points of might. So I get that. So obviously, this is probably in a larger point list. Otherwise, you only want to play a handful of these with 1 bosun. But that's just my thoughts. I think that they're pretty awesome. I personally want to, try to prove Rainier wrong and bring him to a tournament. What do you think, Rainier?
Yeah. So as you guys probably already know, whatever Devin says is trash anyways. So let's just put that. No, just joking. No, I think my main reason I don't like them is you mentioned it. The 1 might and the Fight 4. I think a really big, and I'll probably actually use this in my next model, but a really big thing about Corsairs is they have no might. And you want to bring in a captain to like give them 2 might instead of 1. Plus the Fight 5 helps a lot. But I like that pick actually. I think you're right. They're underused because people are like how do I really do this? It's a little confusing, and then they die really fast. That's my big gripe with them. I'm like, let's go, let's do this, and then like all 8 of them die in 1 round, and I'm like, what? so I get that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I have nothing to say here, having never played Corsairs. It's one of the armies I don't have. So.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I used to play them a lot in the previous edition. They were great.
Now Fight 5.
Yeah, especially with a shade behind them, an axis. It's amazing. But I'm not sure.
I mean, you could actually, because they technically have 2 swords, you could trade 1 sword for an axe for a point if you really want to. You could,
yeah.
Because they're already defense 3, you're going to die if you lose combat. It's just over. So you could probably, trade it for an axe, get the strength 4, and then have the +1 to wound on top of that. I mean, anything that's defense 5 is dying on a 4. I mean, reasonably though, yeah. I mean, I get the inherent risk behind them, and then also with Rainier said with the might. I think this is an army where you don't play pure Corsairs. You probably need to ally with like a Shadow Lord or something if you spam them. Like I said, if you don't spam them, then you can just kind of drop them in with a few others. But I mean, I think if you do play pure Corsairs, then yeah, you're gonna have a might problem over time.
Yeah,
Or if
I
you,
also like the idea of like I've seen someone do this on one of the Facebook groups. Don't bring a bosun. Just bring like maybe 2 or 3 in each warband and like send them 6 inches away from your guys. And if they fail, like, oh, there goes Jerry. Like, you know. but it's worth like tossing in a couple of them just for funsies. I don't know.
I actually with a horn. I mean, as long as you don't have like 20 of them, yeah, I actually would feel very comfortable with about 6 of them, or 6
points
out
are
of 10. They're 9 points apiece.
So yeah, that might be worth it just to have a couple of them, just to kind of send out and freak out your opponent.
Yeah. So
All
that's the fact that they're fearless. By the way, I want to also mention that the fearless is huge. So good.
Matt, what was your third model?
All right, so my next model was Braga, Captain of the Guard from the Army of Lake Town list, who is essentially, as long as you pair him with the Master, and you never want to take him without the Master, but once he's paired with the Master, he becomes he becomes basically a Taskmaster on steroids, because he's got the Master's Puppet special rule that allows him to roll a dot as long as he's within 6 inches of the Master. And he calls a heroic action on a 4+, he gets that for free. So he's got 3 might, and if you bring Alfred along, you can pump a couple more might into him, 2 or 3 more might into him, and all of a sudden he becomes a might battery for your army. And I mean, that's great just to be able to continually call those heroic moves whenever you want to. He's also got heroic march, so you can use him just to march every turn if you want to. And with 3 or 4 or 5 might, he's probably going to be able to march anytime you need him to, and still have a couple might points left over to call heroic defense a couple times when he gets into combat. And as long as he's within 6 inches of the Master, and the Master is calling a special rule, he goes up to fight 5 and gets an automatic banner as well. So he's a pretty decent fighter. So you get all that for 50 points, which I think is well worth it. And he's somebody who can ally into a lot of the Hobbit good armies. And I think he's a great might battery that way. And the only reason you haven't seen kind of more of him is because there isn't a Braga figure. You have to convert one, which isn't particularly hard to do. I think I did a head swap with Girian onto a Lake Town captain in order to get mine. But once you do that, he's a great model to throw in a lot of armies.
I actually 100% agree with Braga. Actually, I was very close to putting him on my list. And I mean, for 50 points, what you're getting with him is what is easily an undercosted model. I mean, he's definitely cheap. If you compare him to like Gorbag and all of them, like he's ridiculously underpointed. And the best part about him in Lake Town list is when you pick the Master of Lake Town, you know that the Master has 2 points of might, but he doesn't really. Like, for the purposes of heroic anything, like he doesn't have those points of might. You're going to be using it on his ability. So Braga easily makes that back up by just having such a massive economy in the fact that he's his own Taskmaster. So I think a minor other point is, and I've never used this, and I'm really eager to use a Lake Town list for this and try it, but the fact that he doesn't take part of Bard's heroic actions, and he forces all other Lake Towners to not take part in Bard's heroic actions within 3 inches of him, kind of makes him like this weird impossible alliance gimmick where you can call a heroic move and then have some things in reserve to counter what your opponent does in response to your heroic move. So I actually kind of like that fact about him. As long as you always keep him positioned correctly, I think that's great. So.
All right, we're going to move over to Rainier. Rainier, what was your model?
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the Corsairs. I'm gonna choose a Corsair captain. I think they're underappreciated. One, because I just love them so much, and I think they need more loving. No, but I think they're underappreciated because for 55 points, you can get a 2 might model with the ability to heroic march, who has a crossbow, has the ability to dehorse an enemy's mega hero or even wound an enemy's hero. You also get thrown weapons, so all of a sudden you become really lethal at different ranges. And if you get him with the army bonus, you have the ability, backstabber ability at Fight 5, which is a really big deal in my opinion. So I wouldn't say that he, by himself, I guess, is like super scary. Like you're not going to come up against him and be like, oh shoot. But for 55 points, the way he complements a Corsair list is just really, really good. And I think I don't see him as much. I see Corsair lists with Bosuns or more Bosuns, or I see Corsair lists with Dalgamar and stuff. And I just like the ability of spamming as much captains as you can just for what they do.
All right, Nick, your list or your next model?
I got Wild War Chieftain. That's one of those things which, in the past, he's always been pretty weak, but then in this edition, he's got an extra attack, so he's now sitting on 3 attacks with Fight 5 and Strength 6. And he can lead up to 12 orcs or wargs or whatever else from Angmar. So I actually really like them because they're fast, they've got high strength, and quite a big punch for a relatively sort of low cost in an army, which is filled with basically 5 or 6 point costing models. But again, I feel like there are just so many other good options in Angmar that people just overlook the chieftain, like with especially with Barrow Whites and Shades, because they sort of like fill in around the same point level. Though I would say that again, it's sort of in lower points battles, having a pretty strong killer like Wild War Chieftain might be really useful. Whilst in higher points battles, he's probably too easy to kill. That's why people are not taking him.
Yeah, I was actually really close to putting a Warg Chieftain on my list. I looked at him, and the only reason that turned me off to it is I think for what he delivers, his 80-point cost is a little high. And I think he's good, but like I don't know, I just compare him to a lot of other things around that similar point cost, and I just kind of wish he was like 70 or 60, but it probably 60 would be too low. But basically, the other thing was that only wargs can benefit from any heroic actions or stand fast that he does, and so that means he's strictly spending his might on heroic combats because he has march. Like you look at it, he has heroic march, but you still have to get another heroic march in the list because nothing will react to his. And so that was what prevented me from putting it in. I almost felt like it was a little bit, not that he's bad, I think he's good, but I almost felt it was a little justified. We rarely see him strictly because he's just very expensive and you still have to get another heroic marcher. And you know that his might is not valuable to the army itself. So that was my problems with him.
I mean, the army itself doesn't really have very much might anyway. Like with things like Whites and Gulavar generally wanting to spend might for himself. So
it's true, that is the way the army functions. So
yeah. So I'm not really bothered by the fact that he's not going to be using any might for the army.
All right, Devin, your next model.
All right, so the next one actually is an homage to one of the previous episodes we did, which is the Vault Warden teams. I actually really like the Vault Warden teams. I've really wanted to use them in a list. For those of you who didn't see our Khazad-dûm review, we actually had Alistair King, whom is a GBHL, basically he's like essentially a high-ranking GBHL player. Actually, I think he's the head of the entire league, but essentially he plays Vault Warden teams a lot, and I've always been inspired by the Vault Warden teams and really wanted to do it because, I mean, just defense 9 right in your front rank. Basically, you got to kill them with luck, and then, yeah, strength 4, fight 4, re-rolling 1s with the army bonus, and then the fact that they can be bannered. Usually, you're going to have a King's Champion around them. I mean, I have always found these guys to be good. The big problem with them, a lot of people see, is the 25-point cost, but when you actually kit out a list with them, you're going to notice very quickly that your numbers stay pretty high because they're really 10 and 15 points, respectively. I mean, I don't really know how the breakdown actually is, but that's effectively what they are. So I actually really like them, and I actually wanted to put them on this list for that reason. And of course, the cherry on top is the fact that monsters can't use any brutal power attacks against them. But I think the final thing I use them for personally is also to tie up heroes. If you know a hero is going for heroic combat or probably will want to, then putting one of these in his way creates a problem. Of course, anything with strength 5 plus 1 to wound will kill them, but any other hero would struggle quite a bit to kill them off. So that's my next pick.
All right, Matt, your next pick.
So my next pick was the Goblin King, who at 130 points buys you a fight 6 3-might monster who gets burly special rule and can pierce if he wants a little bit of extra wounding, and he's resistant to magic. Obviously, you see the Goblin King plenty whenever Goblin Town is played, but he can ally into a lot of different armies, including Moria. And for 130 points, he's probably one of the best monster hero picks in the game. Especially, the other thing I should mention is his Blubbery Mass special rule. So he's basically going to ignore all wounds on a 3+. So he's incredibly tough to try and kill. He's somebody, if you're taking a Moria list and you want something to kill, instead of that cave troll, you might want to spend a few extra points and throw this guy into your list along with some cheap goblins to run around beside you. And the same thing if you can ally into Azog's legions, he can ally into basically any of the Hobbit evil armies. And I think he's somebody you should always consider throwing in there, as long as you don't care about theme. He's somebody you should always consider throwing in there, given the amount of power that he brings.
Honestly, I'm glad you mentioned him because he's one that when you first said him, I'm like, wait a minute, he's played all the time. Like, I don't get it. But you're right. You never see him allied. And as many things as we ally around all the time, I really have no idea why we don't see Goblin Kings dropped with like 18 models dropped in with him. I mean, he not only bolsters a force, essentially adding 18 models to the ranks if you really want him to. And I get the idea is that you can break faster if you just target those. But in a standard army, you're probably going to have a lot more things, to complement that, to stop that from actually happening. You don't have to put in 18. But yeah, the Goblin King is really, really annoyingly powerful. And I think the best thing is you can put Gollum in the list. You put Gollum with him, he kills everything. So just my thought on that. I agree with that entirely. So all right.
All right, Rainier, your pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go with actually the Osgiliath Veteran. I know the Osgiliath Veteran is very unpopular because for the same points. Yeah, they're shot. I came with like way underused models, and you guys throwing out like the Goblin King and other people, and I'm like, but I see them all the time. No, yeah, yeah, my list is like crap models that I'm like, I got the wrong memo. No,
We didn't mean underused models for a reason.
Yes. Okay, so here's my excuse though for it. So I know you can get for the same points a bodyguard guy and a citadel guard, but here's what I'm thinking. You give an Osgiliath Veteran an axe, and he's 9 points, and now you have a fight with the bonus of Gondor. You have a Courage 5 model that can be Strength 4, Defense 5 on shooting, so bows are still going to wound him on 6s. And if he's around Boromir or Faramir, he's Fight 4. But if he's around Boromir with the banner, he's Fight 5. So you have the potential of having a Fight 5 model, Strength 4, and Courage 5 for 9 points, which in my opinion is what Gondor kind of needs sometimes. You usually have a shield wall, and the heroes do the killing, and the warriors just survive. So this is kind of, I know it's probably not going to go too well, but it is a way to throw in a little bit of killing power for a Gondorian force, albeit there are better options, but it'll give Strength 4, like I said, with an axe, and you'll still get Courage 5 and potential Fight 5.
So the argument basically is that he is Strength 4 at a 1 point cheaper cost than if you had taken a Guard of Fountain Court with an axe, or I guess other options with an axe. Because I'm trying to look and compare, and I guess I can see that argument to it. I guess a lot of people would just rather have the fight 4 that is natural to them.
Oh yeah, someone would rather probably pay 2 more points for a defense 7 fight 4 also bodyguard.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know. I think it still has the ability to work because you do get that strength 4 and again the possibility of a fight 5 with a strength 4 model that's an elf courage. Like I don't know. I kind of like just for a theme list, or even if you want to throw in a couple here or there, and you have strength 4 models. I don't know. They look cool too.
I'd be interested in seeing it. I think just for the sake of go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would actually have to put the agility. I mean, we talked a little, I think, before the show about models that have no reason for existing, and I think this is on my list of models that have no reason for existing.
I'm in the same camp as Matt.
I'm trying to bring them to light, guys. I'm trying to bring them to light.
What
They look
bothers me
cool,
about this
okay?
one is, I mean, they're the veterans, right? But somehow in their long term of service, they forgot how to use a shield wall.
Yeah.
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 You can't really put them in the shield wall with your regular guys. And I mean, I'd always rather pay a point less and have my ordinary guy standing next to Boromir, who still has the banner, is going to make him fight 4, and put a ranger behind him who's going to be fight 5. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but then also veterans, they look so cinematic without a helmet and all. They just
There you
look
go.
like movie heroes.
so take those figures and use them as ordinary ministerial warriors. You don't want to go for peace.
I guess we'll go through Mick's final picks because I know Mick, you'll actually have to leave before we go into the duel here.
Sadly, yeah. So my final pick is gonna be finally someone from the good side for me. That's Errol the Young. We were talking earlier about Isildur being incredibly good for his points. I might not always agree with that, but Errol the Young is even better for his points. He's virtually always overlooked because there are things like Theoden, the sort of the standard Rohan cavalry, gambling, all the free might and all that stuff. But all these things cost a lot of points. Whilst Earl is our legendary hero of valor for just 115, and he, especially in low points games, he's incredibly good with like 4 attacks on charge, high strength, high defense, all the heroics. Yeah, he just does everything you need a hero to do in anything like 500 points and less. But anything higher, the lack of other named heroes is becoming an issue. But at low points, he's great.
And I guess I can see the argument to that because I'm like 20 points less than the Isildur, and we're going to say they have the same strength because of the army bonus. Fight value drops by 1. Otherwise, stats remain fairly consistent. He has a throwing spear, can move faster, has the same heroic actions, and then gets a 4-up on his might. So the fact that if you do not have a Isildur with the ring, then this guy is definitely more points efficient as long as you're not suffering from the restrictions he puts in place by picking him. So,
Yeah, having just been run over by Earl the Young in a low points game during this past week, I really can't disagree. He is terrifying. And I mean, the other thing, I'm not sure you mentioned it, but one of the most terrifying things about him is all of a sudden the Sons of Earl go back to having all the power that they had before with the extra attack. So 3 attacks on the charge with the ability to and they can go up to strength 6 with their axe and with the Rohan special rule you get with them. And they're equally terrifying charging alongside Earl.
They could almost be hurling if they were monsters, but they can't.
yeah, actually, the fact that they bring Sons of Earl to actually justify their point cost is great as well. So.
Mick, your last model?
Ooh, my last model. Ooh, I get a double. So this time, jumping onto the evil side again, I was thinking about Ugluk. Because most of the time I've seen lists which when Isengard plays, there's things like, let's say, Saruman, Lurtz, Malkur, Vrasku. There's always someone that people take over Ugluk. But at the end of the day, he's relatively cheap. He has a really cool special rule with automatically passing stun fasts for 12 inches for both heroes and warriors. And he's still a 3 might hero, and he has a heroic strike. So there isn't really a bad use for Ugluk, but he's just very often overlooked because of all these other things. Like, people will take Malheur because of the extra attack, or Rasku because of the shooting. But I would always be tempted to squeeze Ugluk somewhere in there.
I guess the only downside about Ugluk is his defense 5, which makes him pretty squishy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Defense 5, 2 wounds, and a curt fate, 1 fate. Yeah, he'll go down quick.
Yeah, Ugluk's guys you have to put in the second rank, because if he gets charged by a fight 6 mounted hero, he'll just die.
Well,
it's actually,
he has a heroic strike, so he won't necessarily.
He can strike up, but as soon as he loses a combat to a
Yes,
decent mounted hero, he's dead.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's the whole reason that they upgraded Lurtz to defense 6 natural. So still he didn't change his armor, so I guess they just did it, arbitrarily. But I think that's what kind of separated him from Ugluk a lot.
Yeah. Well, Lurtz also has that find the halfling special rule, which is actually a really good. The ability just to choose where you come on in Maelstrom of battle scenario is a really important rule.
Yeah.
All right. I'll move over to Devin. Devin, what was your model?
All right. So for my final pick, and this one, I have hesitate to say that it's picked rarely, but I think just not allied enough, I guess, is Mirkwood Spiders. I actually really am terrified by Mirkwood Spiders. I think they are really, really strong models.
They're not real, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, every time I see them. So, so I have a lot of experience playing against these because a local DCHL player that we have used to play Mirkwood Spiders a lot. He's changed armies in the new edition a lot more, but basically I've seen them quite a bit. And these guys, with their ability to just paralyze things, I mean, you can kind of hang them on walls and I played with them against Alex Wright in actually Rainier's tournament, and I had Duel Guldur where I had 3 of these things. The fact that you can just perch them on anything in the game and just kind of spit at stuff right in the middle of combats, you're in the middle of combats, but you're firing over their lines into all these areas, just perching them on rooftops, whatever. And of course, at any point, they can just crawl off and attack something. I mean, obviously, you don't want to play too many of them. Their large bases make them a little unwieldy. But I mean, I think Mirkwood Spiders are great. Terror that they cause and everything. I mean, I love them.
So, Devin, tell me that you're not one of those players that brings along the blue tack to stick on the bottom of the bases and stick them to the sides of buildings and stuff, and say, "Oh no, he's perfectly balanced. He can stay." It's legal.
So the game me and Alex Wright had, you probably, if I played against you, I probably would not have been allowed to do some of the things. So I didn't play with blue tack, but me and Alex agreed that they were at this point in the building. So you would have probably said they can't balance. So, and also that's the other problem, putting them on the side of buildings. I'm not sure if that rule stayed in the game, but I remember an older rule was that you have to be able to balance the model and leave it there in order for it to stay there. So I think Matt would be fully.
I'm pretty sure that rule is still in the game.
Okay, well, if that's still in the game, then we had a gentleman's agreement to play it correctly. But regardless of that, most surfaces are flat, and you can still kind of perch them in places. And actually, it was funny because my game against Damien O'Byrne in Articon in doubles, I was trying to paralyze a Gundabad troll that he had, and same kind of effect. They're just scary. The fact that just one lucky roll and boom, your whole model's paralyzed. So.
All right, Matt, your last model.
My last model is my only non-hero model for this list, and that's the Warrior of Arnor for 8 points. So 8 points buys you Fight 4, Strength 3, Defense 6, and a spear and a shield. and of course, Hatred Angmar if you want it. And I mean, the only real downside there is Courage 2, but there are lots of ways to get around that as a problem. I think these Warriors of Arnar are one of the most solid troop types in the game for their points. And the only real downside to them, the only reason you don't see them more, is it's hard to ally them in. But they make the perfect. I mean, they're great in an army on their own, just as like the core of your army. With maybe you want to ally in a wizard, but they make the perfect allies for Rivendell because they're nice, cheap, high defense bodies that you can use to supplement the numbers of your elves. So you ally a warband or two of these guys in with an elf hitter like Glorfindel or somebody like that. And then if you want to, you can put Círdan in as well, and that gets rid of your courage problem. These guys make a really solid line that's tough to get through, especially if you bring Malbeth along and they're getting a free 5+ fate save all the time.
Actually, I think that's actually correct. It's the at lower points games. Actually, it's the reason I think you see Arnor win a lot more because they're just so cheap for the stats they're bringing, and very efficient. The fight forward, defense 6. I mean, they survive and kill or win fights. So I agree.
All right. And finally, Rainier, last model. What is it?
All right, my last model is Theodred, actually. So I think Theodred is a beat stick that's not used quite often. For 95 points, you can get a fight 5, potential strength 5, defense 7, 3 attack model with heroic strike on a horse. I think that's pretty strong for its points wise. You can even do 5 more points, and you have a 100-point model with throwing spears and 3 might to just do whatever you want. So I think, I just think he's not really taken that often, of course, because he only has 2 wounds and 1 fate. But if anyone's going to play Theodred, he's also a hero of valor, so you can kind of spam more boys with him. But if anyone's going to use him, they're going to realize, okay, shoot, this guy's going to die eventually. Why not just get my money's worth? And I think he can do a lot of pain against regular warriors, just cutting through like flanks or cutting through a battle line. But he can also go toe-to-toe with many heroes and survive 1 or 2 failed fights with the defense 7. Most good heroes, for example, are strength 4, so they're going to wound him on 6s. So yeah, I like him. I think he's kind of in there like a Isildur. He's overshadowed by a lot heavier hitters like Éomer and the likes. But yeah, I like him. I don't know.
So one thing to keep in mind with Theodred is you always have to be careful of his. I mean, the flip side of his reckless charge special rules, the fact that he always has to charge. So, and because he's on a horse, it's very easy to get him drawn out. So he's somebody that has to really be the second rank of the cavalry, with maybe a hole for him to charge out, but not a hole where he's going to get drawn out as the front guy. You never want to put this guy in the front rank, or else he's going to get drawn out into a combat, surrounded and killed. He always needs to have a couple of his buddies who are like Theodred's there going, hold me back, boys, hold me back. And then surrounding him to, keep him from getting into that bar fight where he's going to get his ass kicked.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, there's a couple Corsair Reavers just charging at him. They're like yelling at each other back and forth trying to... No, I totally agree with you. I think he's really good, and for his points, you can pair him with really good heroes like an Éomer, or you can even throw in like a Huron in there, or other big mounted heroes. And Theodred also rerolls all failed to wound rolls, I think it says.
Yeah, he rerolls all failed to wound, yeah.
When he charges. So again, him coupled with other, and you see all hero lists or heavy hero lists with Rohan all the time in competitive scenes. Him coupled with other people is just quite scary, to be honest, for the points you get.
All right, so that's our top 5. Let us know in the comment section below what your top 5 would be. And next we're going to move into the duel where Matt will be playing off against Devin. Yeah. All right, and now we're going to move on to the duel. For anybody that's new to the duel, this is where we have 2 contestants go up against each other in a hypothetical battle where I have given them 3 possible scenarios. The scenarios that I gave them for this week, they could be playing are Seize the Prize, Heirloom of Ages Past, or Fog of War. I then give them a random terrain piece that they react to live. They have not seen the terrain board that will be given to them. And then finally, they will see each other's armies and determine how they would do best to go against them. And then me and Rainier will vote and see who we think would win that battle. And if a tie happens, then you, the fans listening to the podcast, can vote to see who you would think would win this. So we're going to start off by talking about the three scenarios. So I gave them Fog of War, Heirlooms, and Seize the Prize. The scenario that I've picked for today is Seize the Prize. So what do you guys think about Seize the Prize?
I think this is going to be great.
I think I'm fine with it. We'll see what Matt picks. I'm fine. My list can handle it.
So for anybody that doesn't know about Seize the Prize, so each person can deploy up to 12 inches on each side. They get 3 victory points if they carry the artifact. They get 5 if they have more models carrying the artifact and manage to move it off the board. And if they get it off the opponent's board edge, then they get 7. They get 1 point for causing a wound on the leader, 2 if they kill them, 1 for breaking the force, and 3 for breaking and being unbroken. And the special rule is the artifact. So you, on a 4+, if you try to pick up the artifact, you can't use might to influence it. And you can only get 1 try per turn, but it has to be a foot model that tries to pick it up.
All right, so got a real treat for all of you. All right, this is my unorthodox army that I actually took to Articon and won every game except for 2 of them. One of them was against Sauron in a Balrog in Contest of Champions, which is like unfair. And the other one, I actually almost was beating him, but it was due to, unfortunately, he took the best of me. So it actually is a lot more solid of a list than you might imagine. The list is Gandalf the Grey on horse, 14 Lake Towners, all right, armed with spear and shield and a mixture of bows. And I'll tell you how many bows I have. And then I have Alfred and his warband. Then I have a captain of Lake Town with 12 Lake Towners. Once again, spear and shield, and then have bows. So I have 9 bows total, plus the Iron Hills Chariot with a captain on it, and that has a crossbow, so I have a little more bows on there. So, and then he's leading 9 Iron Hills Warriors, and 1 has a banner. So a total of 39 models. I have 9 bows plus a crossbow, a repeater crossbow, so it's D6 shots. Now, the thing about this list, the thing that makes it great, because you might shock, like, okay, you have an Iron Hills Chariot. We never see one of those. And that's what most of my opponents said. The thing about it is when you move the Iron Hills Chariot into close range, so at distance, I outshoot most people, okay? I have blinding light, I have more bow shots, and honestly, you're not going to go into a shooting war with a chariot most of the time. I'm just going to gun you down. So most of the time, I'm good. Now, in Seize the Prize, I have to move forward anyway. Perfect. I'm fine with that. Alfred pumps the captain full of might. I've got tons of march, and I even have march on the chariot if I really need it. I can pile drive through stuff. If you guys don't remember, the chariot has 3 strength 6 hits that it applies every time it moves. So regarding all of that, the conundrum that this chariot creates is in the combat phase, or I'm sorry, in the move phase when we're actually in combat, if you allow me to move first, then I'm going to trample you. So, of course, you're going to call a heroic move. I'm okay with that. I'll call a heroic move, too, with my captain, who might be able to get even a free heroic move on a 5-up. If you don't remember, I can do that. I can, even if he runs out of might, I can still call heroic moves with my captain, who has 5 might at this point, okay, because of Alfred. All right, so I call a heroic move with you. If you win, then okay, you charge the chariot. I'm totally fine with that. Gandalf Sorcerer's Blast your models that charge into the chariot. Your whole thing gets knocked down, and my chariot is totally unaffected. If you lose, I'm trampling your stuff. So it is this weird pain-in-the-butt problem. Now, even if I win, my chariot will go by himself, all right? So he'll charge forward. Let's say you win priority. The chariot will charge forward, start mowing over stuff. Then, after I'm done moving, you'll probably charge my chariot. Then my actual move phase comes into play, and Gandalf once again blasts everything off the chariot. So this creates quite a conundrum of problems where even if you win the heroic move off or lose it, I don't care. So, of course, if we have a hero jump in there like Aragorn and such, I have a crossbow that can fire into combats. I can shoot at anything that is engaging at me. And once again, I have Blinding Light and a plethora of magical options with Gandalf. Gandalf's my leader, so I'm perfectly fine with throwing in my Chariot. And the Chariot is really difficult to take out. Of course, Sauron and a Balrog have no issue with this, but I'm hoping Matt is not playing that. So let's see what Matt's playing.
All right, Matt, what was your list?
So I know we had kind of discussed not rerunning past lists, but I'm evil, so I'm going to disregard that. So having seen this particular scenario loadout, I figured I had to bring the signal tower again. So my list is Azog on the White Warg with all the bells and whistles, stone flail, heavy armor, 22 Gundabad Berserkers, 1 Warbat, and the signal tower with his 7 lieutenants and 4 banners on top of it. So now we go and we see what the board looks like.
No, honestly, as a real quick thing, because I do want to describe this army. So Matt mentions bringing it again. Matt brought this army to not Articon, but Nova. Yeah, he brought it to Nova, and it is surprisingly powerful. I need to pump this list up a little bit because again that Matt is referring to, it's an episode of this podcast that actually was never aired. We actually never have put it up yet.
One of the lost episodes. Okay, so
yeah, it's one of our lost. So you should describe it and talk about how this works.
Okay, so so that requires us to discuss all the bells and whistles that kind of go with the signal tower. And there's 4 banners. There's the first one is the Banner of Angmar, which, if manned, and you get 7 little heroes. You get 7 lieutenants, each with 1 might, who deploy on the signal tower. The signal tower can deploy anywhere on the board right after deployment. And the Banner of Angmar allows everybody on the board to get a 6-up fate save. All Gundabad models anyway. And the Gundabad Berserkers, who already have a 6-up fate save, get a 5-up fate save. So that's going to be a bit of a problem when the Chariot starts trying to charge into them, because that Chariot has a higher than usual chance to bounce off of these guys. The next one is the Banner of Dol Guldur, which means that everywhere on the board, everybody counts as being in range of a banner. So Azog's always in range of a banner. Every one of these Berserkers is going to be rolling 3 dice in the dual roll. So it's a big force multiplier. Then you have the Banner of Gundabad, which means that friendly hero models can declare heroic march each turn without spending might. So that means that Azog on the first turn is going to be able to call a free march and run his guys up to wherever they need to be to grab that objective in the center. The last thing is you get the Horn of Gorgoroth, which means that all of my guys get +1 for their courage, which makes the Berserkers essentially infinite courage. And everybody on the other side gets a -1 to their courage, which means it's going to be hard to charge Azog while he's on his White Warg.
And honestly, for those of you out here who are thinking, like, what? You have, like, what is it, 15 Gundabad Berserkers?
No, 22 Gundabad Berserkers.
22. So you might think, okay, he has nothing but Gundabad Berserkers and a few lieutenants, 7 lieutenants, and Azog. This list is surprisingly effective. And I think what we'll probably do, and you can mention in the comments section below if you actually want to see this episode, we can go ahead and air the episode where we even see Mick's reaction, because Mick has never heard of a list like this. And over in Britain, they don't play the Signal Tower except at joke tournament, like Throne of Skulls, where you're just kind of coming and playing whatever. The actual Signal Tower itself has some effective uses to it, where you can place it anywhere on the board and start to disrupt objectives. So me and Matt are going to have to agree on whether or not he can even place the Signal Tower on top of Seize the Prize, or more importantly, I don't think he needs to. He actually will probably describe how he'll place the Signal Tower to disrupt my ability. But the Signal Tower itself is key to this list. And so I'm bringing it up a little bit because we discussed this for a good 30 minutes in a previous episode. So anyway, let's go ahead into the duel itself, and we'll see how that works out. So,
all right. I will now show everybody the board. I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I apologize, Devin, because this is not going to go well for you, I think. All right, and here's the board. What are your thoughts?
All right, buildings.
This is perfect.
I'm not going to lie. So just so everybody knows, I did not know that Devin was going to be taking a chariot. So I'm not going to lie to you. As soon as he said chariot, my initial thoughts were, oh, God, I just completely, oh, gosh.
You railed me.
Especially if you look to the left side of the board right there, there's that little thing in the middle. So it basically blocks the left side of the board, I would imagine, for the chariot, or it makes it very, very difficult for it to move.
Yeah, you can't even bring it on.
I'm not going to lie to you. I this is not great for Devin, but I'm interested to hear how you guys would deal with this.
All right. So
I think the first thing I have to do, well, actually, the first thing we need to do is figure out which side we're going to be on.
Go ahead and roll to see which side, Tim.
All right. So Matt will be able to deploy first.
All right, so I'll be quick. So I'm going to take the side that's closest to the bottom of the screen, and then once we've chosen size, I put the signal tower. And I'm assuming, just looking at this, Devin, that the center of the board is slightly to the left. Well, okay. So for those who are, if there's anybody who's not able to visualize this, this is a board. This board is a town with a wall on the left-hand side of the board, and then there's 8 fairly large buildings scattered throughout it, most of which are kind of clustered around the center. And there is, from my perspective of the board, looking from the bottom to the top, near the center, there's a largest building just to the left of center, and then a smallish building just to the right of center. And it's looking like, Devin, that the prize is going to go basically just to the left of that smallish building. Is that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So
also, let's agree you can't put the signal tower
on top of
the objective. Yeah.
And fine, I won't put it on the objective, because as you pointed out, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up putting the signal tower just on your side of the objective, and probably up against that small building on the right, so that you can't really get at it without kind of going around all of the buildings. And I'm also going to arrange it so the steps that go up to the signal tower, and for those of you who haven't seen my signal tower model, maybe we'll put a picture of it up on this podcast drop somewhere, but it's about 6 or 8 inches high, and it's got kind of steps that kind of go around it. It's also maybe about 7 inches wide. So I'm going to drop the signal tower so that one of the steps is right next to where the prize is, and then one of the lieutenants is going to be standing right next to the prize, so he can basically step off and start digging that thing. And then when I deploy, basically I'm going to put Azog and the rest of his buddies in kind of the open area, just on basically where you expect them to be, and seize the prize, which is, a 12-inch direct shot up to the prize. So on the first turn, I can call the march, go up, and send both my Warband and Azog up to be next to the lieutenant, who's going to step off of the signal tower and hopefully dig up the prize. So the turn afterwards, he can choose to hand it either to the Warband or to Azog, and away we go.
All right. Well, I mean, as far as me, and Rainier, let me know when you got like a 3-minute warning here, but okay. So this is a very bad situation, I'm not going to lie. The signal tower is directly in the way, and he moves so fast that he's on objective turn 1. So, it's pretty much impossible for me to be on objective turn 1 with the signal tower directly in my way. So I do want to harass the signal tower a little bit, but and I might send some men that way, but he does have some fairly competent troops that can deal with it. What I'd probably do is have my chariot, probably from our perspective, I'm going to go on the left-hand side because I can't go up the center for all those who can't see it. Essentially, he's got a signal tower in between buildings, so I can't go up the center of the board to go get the objective. So I'll probably just go on the left-hand side. And while obviously anyone out there thinking like, okay, if you go left or right, then Matt just goes the other way and then, can take the prize and run with it. What Gandalf's going to have to do is he's going to have to stay back a little bit, or if not back, in such a position where, Matt doesn't have any bows. He has nothing that can threaten me at range. So keep him with a couple Lake Towners. You can do some blocking, but otherwise, Gandalf's going to have to play objective control. I don't think he's going to dismount Azog to get the objective. I think he'll probably give it to the Warband or another Berserker. And Gandalf is probably going to have to...
To be clear, what's going to happen here is the Lieutenant's going to dig it up, and then the next turn, he will hand it to either Azog still on the Warg or hand it to the Warband, depending which one is
fair.
the way to go.
Yeah, his list creates a lot of complications my list does not usually have to deal with. My Chariot loses its effectiveness in the fact that I'm having to corral around these buildings. And normally buildings are not actually a problem because really it bottlenecks my opponent to where I can just crush a lot of things at once. But he's so fast that I don't expect his Berserkers to really be around when I finally get there. Yeah, I mean, the only way this really works is I have to use Gandalf. Essentially, putting some Lake Towners on the other side, on the right-hand side. So I'm moving on the left, from our perspective anyway. It'll be the right if I'm standing on that side of the board. And then I basically am putting Lake Towners on the other side. Iron Hills Doors, actually. I have Iron Hills Doors. I'll probably put them on the other side. And they won't try to keep up with the Chariot. So the Chariot itself will try to encourage Matt to move one way. And then I'll put the blockade on the other side. And then with the blockade in place, Gandalf should have enough time to basically transfix or compel Azog enough where he runs out of will to resist my spells. At that point, hopefully if I can make the game take long enough, the Chariot will come up behind him. Because although he has the 5-up saves, I do wound him on 3s. So I have 3 dice needing 3s. I don't think he's going to get 3 5-ups. Like that, I just really don't see that happening. My crossbow also wounds him pretty easily. So I think if he loses too many troops, he's going to start running into problems. And his might, he's got a lot of might, honestly, to do the heroic move-offs and stuff. So chances are if he does a heroic move, he can't do it with Azog. He's got to do it with his lieutenants. And then he's just going to charge strictly that lieutenant at my Chariot. So that way he doesn't lose too many casualties to my Chariot. So admittedly, depending on how those roll-offs go, it could save him long enough to try to punch through my blockade. So I'm saying what Matt might be thinking at the same time because Rainier has a little bit of a deadline here. So it doesn't look incredibly great on my front, but it's not impossible. Basically, I just have to crunch him there. Honestly, if he does not punch through my defense 8 wall with Lake Towners in support, if he does not punch through that and my Chariot catches up, it can cause some real problems. The only thing I can see saving Matt is if he sends Azog himself at the Chariot, and I haven't had enough, maybe I didn't trample him, and maybe he gets the heroic move off, he goes, and then he, only sends Azog. If he sends anything else, I'm going to Sorcerer's Blast everything else along, and Azog will fall. But if he just sends Azog, then I have to do a single magical blast at him. If I fail that in any way, then it could spell a problem where Azog outright kills the Chariot. I think in this case, the Chariot itself, and Matt, you may have to correct me on this. I'm not 100% sure because the Chariot is actually a separate model from him, and he can get on and off the Chariot at will, and the Chariot can move on. I don't think you wound the Chariot on 3s. I think you just wound the captain on 3s.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So now the Chariot itself, you do wound it on 5, so it's not
basically
ridiculous.
If I'm hitting the Chariot, what I'm doing is I'm using the flail. So I'm because the Chariot's not going to get up higher than fight 5. So if I got into the Chariot, I'd be going fight 6, and if I win, I'm going to be doing strength 5 with +1 to wound. And every time I strike, I'm going to be doing D3 wounds. So I'm still probably going to take the Chariot down in a turn, especially with 6 might behind it. But with that said, which way is the Chariot going? So looking at it as we're looking at the screen.
So the reason I'm not coming down the right.
Down the right.
Okay, so I went down the left side only because there's less of those little boxes, crates, and signs. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but there's a few little signs and stuff that I think blocks a little bit of my path. Coming in from the other direction.
So if that happens, just because I know we got to get Rainier in here and speak before he turns into a pumpkin, but if you're going down the left then what I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm going to be handing off to Azog, and we're going to be running around the right, and we're probably going to be running around see that big building on the right that has like maybe a 6-inch section just to the right of it?
Yeah.
I'm going to be running. So Azog's heading that way, and he's going to be marching. So he's going to be going 15 inches with the Warband and some 11-inch berserkers going with him, and we're going around the right-hand side of that building. So I'm not sure once your chair is committed to the left, I don't think it's ever where we're going to see it again, frankly.
I mean, it does have march, and it can still trample even while marching, but I can...
It's the maneuverability. Having played the chariot, it's that, I got to move 4 inches forward, and then I do a 45-degree turn, then 4 inches forward, then a 45-degree turn. By the time you swing that thing around, I think I'm going to be past. But anyway, let's let Rainier talk.
You're right. Go ahead, Rainier. What do you think?
I honestly think it's really close. Like, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not just saying that for viewers. Like, I don't know. I think Gandalf can do a lot in this game. He still has Compel and Transfix, right?
Yeah, he has all his spells. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could even, because I know Matt won the roll off, so he's gonna go first, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even if Matt picks it up on the first round, you have the ability of Gandalf to compel.
He can't because the signal tower is in the way. He's not going to be able to see me.
I would go around the other way.
Yeah, Gandalf.
No, I mean, I can set it up on the first turn so that there's no way. If I snuggle the signal tower up against those two buildings there, you're not going to be able to see me until I break out.
Do you deploy the signal tower before he deploys or after?
I think it's before.
Oh, because my thing is like, okay, even if it's 6 to 8 inches wide, or I forget how big it is, he could deploy on either side with Gandalf and send him with Heroic March around 12 inches and then compel the guy on the first round. I don't even think you have to Heroic March, actually, because you're 12 inches. You can move him up to 10 inches. And how far is Transfix?
12.
12. Yeah, so I think he can get a line of sight because a lot of these buildings still have windows on the lower floors.
I don't think I'm going to be able to see through the building, but I do think that if I line up on that right-hand side, I could possibly get some sort of field of vision because the Azog's a big model to hide.
Yeah. And then you could move. I don't know. Azog starts on the tower or deployed away?
No, he
starts deployed. So he's gonna run up on basically on the lee side of that signal tower in those buildings.
And how far does Azog go?
He can go 15 inches.
Oh, and keep in mind
he doesn't need to. I mean, and also Azog's probably going to he's going to end up in a position where I can just wall him in with one of the berserkers that's following behind.
Yeah. So you'd basically be picking it up with like a bat swarm or something on the first round?
Probably it's going to be the lieutenant because the lieutenant can just step off of the signal tower and dig it up.
Yeah.
Two quick notes. As a quick note, because the viewers will probably mention this, remember the prize is dug up on a 50% chance without being affected by might. So we can't account for that variable.
That's true.
Yeah, we can't account for that, but because we don't know when it would be picked up. We could have Tim probably just roll a dice a couple times to see when it would have been picked up.
Yeah, and that's a difficult part because I know like Matt and I played the same scenario at last Nova, and it took you like 4 turns to dig it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that you should have won that game, but it took so long to dig it up. So I don't know. I think this game has a lot of variables. I think the first couple turns are going to determine and which way it's going to go. I don't know.
As one last note, just so you know, if Matt surrounds Azog, I am definitely casting a Sorcerer's Blast on one of his berserkers and knocking him off.
No, yeah, I get that, and I think
you got to get the angle on it. I mean, I'm pretty
sure
have to get these buildings are aligned that you're not going to be able to get a spell in from Gandalf if I position the signal tower right, as I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I get that. I just
that's what really helps about this is that I can basically kind of put that prize in an area where I basically got kind of a U of buildings all around it, and I got all the time in the world to dig it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that, and I think Gandalf's spell casting is like really good, not like alone away from the chariot as well. I think it's going to come huge in this game because you're going to have to respond to what Matt does. He responds to what you do, and Gandalf is gonna, be able to do so much in that aspect. I think the Gundabad Berserkers are really good, especially with their speed. But I think in itself, outside of Azog, the Berserkers can crumble really quick, to whether that be shooting or the chariot. And I know that they have a high up save, but still the main threat, in my opinion, is Azog, of course, the signal tower, and Matt having like the upper hand. I think it's obvious Matt has the upper hand in the scenario and the positioning. But the idea that Devin has two big toys to play with in that, in the sense that Gandalf can do such shenanigans that he can disrupt a lot of stuff. So I'm really torn, to be honest. And I really, really hope Tim votes against me because I'm so torn. So it's tied. But I think
hope he votes against me?
I hope he votes against me.
Tim, do not take that as why you should vote.
Yeah, don't listen to me, Tim. It's rigged. No, but I don't know. There's so many variables too with like what Devin was saying, like a 4+ up, you have to get it. So for example, when Matt and I played, like he had Gullivar on it, 4+, and he just never picked it up. So it's hard because even if Azog is there, 4+, what if he doesn't pick it up? But I think just based on the models, the positioning, I'd go 51%, maybe 52% to Matt.
I think something to keep in mind, though, Rainier, is that he's not going to try to pick it up with Azog. He's going to try to pick up with the captain. And once he's picked it up, hand it off to Azog because he wants to keep Azog on the whiteboard.
No, I get that. But still, Gandalf can still compel that captain.
All right, so you're going with Matt?
Yeah. But I get it. Like, even for views, I think Gandalf, especially if Devin uses him, can still compel the captain, or even compel if a bat swarm has, he can compel him 6 inches. But yeah, I'm going to go with Matt, but barely.
All right, I just have 2 quick questions. I apologize, Matt. Where are you deploying the signal tower on the board?
So do you see so in the middle of the board, from the perspective we're looking at it, there's a big house on the left and a little house on the right. And I'm going to deploy the signal tower just on the other side of the prize and basically wall off, use it basically to wall off between the little house on the right and the big house on the left. There might end up being somewhat of a little gap between the big house on the left and the signal tower. You know, it's a little hard to see.
Are you talking about this house right here?
Yeah,
this
that's
house?
right.
Now, would you put it here, or are you saying you put it here?
No, I'd put it on the far side.
Oh, over here?
No.
Up. So you see where that sign is? And that's where it's a little bit weird. We don't know how much space is right there. But Matt is assuming that beyond that sign, he has enough space to put his signal tower.
And it looks like I do, just judging by the figure.
I kind of assumed he did. I don't know in perspective like how big that signal tower is, but that's going to be a big key, is that he has to be able to fit that.
Yeah, but once it's in place, it's a roadblock there, so that the only way that Devin would really be able to get at that prize is to either run around the house on the right or run around the house on the left in order to get in there.
And then I just want to I think this is correct. If you transfix a model, it drops the artifact, correct?
No, it does not.
Oh, it doesn't?
No. It does not. No.
Oh, okay.
If you kill a model in combat, close combat, you automatically receive it.
Yeah, so if my chariot runs over the person with the prize, then I take it automatically. That's the reason Matt is...
No, you don't. You have to kill it in combat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's an impact hit. So even like a Condish chariot, for example, if he did the same thing, he would just drop it. Yeah.
Okay. Then I would just stand on top of it and be like, no one's getting this.
So Devin
done that with a chariot in the game, is basically stand on top with seize the prize, of just standing on top of the prize.
Yeah.
Now, Devin, is your idea basically to kind of create like a wall and then don't let them through, and then eventually kill the model with the prize and then take it?
Whatever side the chariot goes on, which in this case I just happen to say the left-hand side, but whatever he goes on, my army has to kind of be on the other side. Not the entire army, like you don't send the whole thing, but like enough to create a blockade where I give my chariot time to come around his backside. And the way that effectively happens is if I have my captain, whom is unnecessary for the army in this case, along with a little contingent of maybe like 12 guys, run with the chariot, and then I can have the captain plus the chariot himself call heroic marches until until I can get to the other side. You might think the chariot will outpace the captain, but that's not actually true because he has to do all these tight turns. So the captain should actually be able to keep up. And basically that's the idea, is chariot comes around the back. Depending on how that plays out, Gandalf toys around with Azog, because Azog may shift gears and be like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and destroy this chariot now. And so I need to punish Matt with enough spells, which should only take about 3 shots. Once I get 3 spells off at Matt, depending on how he decides to resist it, I should be good to go to be like, all right, Azog's mine for the rest of the game. But it just depends on Matt and how much he feels he needs to resist the spells I fire at him.
I agree with Rainier. I think this is actually tougher than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to pick Matt immediately, just because of the terrain and the. But I think the issue is like we said, how long does it take to get that artifact? And the fact that you can't use might to pick it up, you need a natural 4+. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like whenever we play Seeds the Prize, you either pick it up in the first 2 turns, or you pick it up 9 turns later. Like there's no middle ground. Like it either takes forever or it's immediate. I'll be honest with you. I think I'm going to go Devin. I think Devin's. I think Devin's just going to hold the line long enough, like he said, and then I think ever so slightly I'm going to go Devin. I think Matt's going to, for whatever reason, I think Matt would struggle to pick up the artifact. I think he'd roll poorly, and then I think Devin would just. I'm going to go Devin.
Not going to lie, now that you've already picked your choice, I probably would have picked Matt.
I think Matt could really use the terrain to his advantage. I really do, and I think that'd be my worry for Devin with the whole game. Something about me is saying Devin would win this barely. I don't think it'd be like he wins by like picking up I just think you'd win based on points. I think with I think the key to your list is Gandalf. I think Gandalf's so huge.
Oh, he's made. I mean, honestly, without him, the chariot sucks.
Exactly. All right, so we're gonna go with a split here. I think I really want to pick Matt, but something in me is telling me to go with Devin. So please, in the comment section below, let us know who won this, who you think would win this, and leave any lists that you might have for next episode, and any ideas you'd like to hear from us in future episodes. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
I'm actually totally curious for those who stayed to the end of the video as well. Tim, go ahead and roll a dice and see how many rolls it takes to get a 4 up.
All right, let me pull it up. Let's see. No on the first one.
All right.
No.
Second one, no.
All right, third one.
Third one. So you all have the benefit, those of you who stayed to the end of the video, have the benefit of knowing how many rolls it would have taken for Matt to get the objective. So, but yeah, it's still very, very tough match, honestly, for me. Just because of the layout combined with the scenario, combined with specifically the trick and gimmick that Matt can pull off. So.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a good one.
Bye, guys.